welcome Dr. Robert O'Dowd, who is Associate Professor for English as a foreign language and applied linguistics at University of León in Spain. He has taught at universities in Ireland, Germany, and Spain, and has over 40 publications on the application of virtual exchange in university and pre-university education settings. He was the founding president of the Univ Collaboration, academic organization for tele-collaboration and virtual exchange, and has been invited to be a plenary speaker at international conference in the US, Asia, and across Europe. He currently collaborates with other experts in the Univ Collaboration organization to offer comprehensive evaluation studies on virtual exchange programs. So I warmly welcome you, Robert. You have the word.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexandre. And also thank you very much to Annabella for inviting me and for sending me many emails over the past few weeks to help me organize this. I'm very sorry that I am not in Coimbra today, but I appreciate that. I don't think anybody is in Coimbra except the locals, right? Am I right to say that? Yeah. It's a very sad, I love to go on holidays to Óbidos in Portugal, and we always drive from León. We pass by the sign that says Coimbra, and my wife always says, that's a beautiful town, we have to go there, we have to go there. And I thought that this time I was going to get to finally meet Coimbra. But, well, maybe next time, maybe another time. Anyway, I really enjoyed listening to Marjo's talk, and I found it very, very, I think it's going to link very well with what I am going to say as well, because an awful lot of the competences that, Marjo, you mentioned are the ones that we are trying to develop, that teachers are trying to develop on the virtual exchange, okay? So maybe you will see some things in common with what I'm going to be talking about now, right? But to explain very briefly what I'm going to do, I'm just going to talk about, first of all, why there's so much interest in virtual exchange at the moment, okay? Then I'll explain what it is and try to differentiate it to other terms such as virtual mobility or MOOCs that are also being talked about so much. And then just give you some basic examples about how it works and some basic recommendations for those of you that are interested in using it in university education, okay? So first of all, a question to you is, you know, what is the average international mobility in your country? Does anybody know that? Anybody like to turn on their microphones and tell me maybe in Portugal, what percentage of students travel abroad every year? On Erasmus or anything like that? I imagine that silence means nobody's not, people are not very sure, okay? In Finland either, we're not too sure. Well, according to this data from Erasmus, Portugal is, here you can see the second red arrow here. It's quite high, it's 8%, which is more or less the average in all of Europe, okay? Finland, I cannot find Finland, let me see, where is it? Oh, look at Finland. Finland is excellent. Finland is 15%. Okay, so that's very good. But I suppose, even though we all agree that traveling abroad and having an online learning, a learning experience abroad in another university is an ideal experience for students. When we see this kind of data, we see that, you know, even though the European Commission and Erasmus has been financing this for so many years, the amount of students that go abroad is still very, very little. Okay, it's a very low level. And, you know, even the European Commission itself is saying, you know, internationalization should ensure that the large majority of learners who are not mobile are nonetheless able to acquire the international skills required in a global world. In other words, all of our students that do not go abroad should still have the opportunity to develop the skills and have the experiences of an international experience, okay? And that's why nowadays, I'm sure in Portugal and in the other countries, you will have heard of movements such as internationalization at home and internationalization of the curriculum. All right, and this is all about trying to give students international learning experiences while staying on campus. Okay. Now, one way we can go about doing this is virtual exchange. Okay, and I'm going to give you a brief definition of now what we understand virtual exchange to be. Okay, it's about getting groups of students in sustained online intercultural interaction and collaboration with partner classes in other countries as an integrated part of coursework and under the guidance of their educators or expert facilitators. So this is about bringing groups of learners in Coimbra into online collaboration projects with students in Helsinki or León or wherever, but as, pardon me, as an integrated part of their coursework. That means as an integrated part of their studies. And their teachers, the teachers of the courses, are shall we say, guiding this experience and organizing it, giving the students tasks to do together and things like that. Okay. Now, maybe you have heard of this under some kind of other terminology, because there are many terms used to talk about this. Okay. If you have been in contact with American universities, for example, you might have heard about COIL, Collaborative Online International Learning. That's a very common one. If you come from the background of foreign language education, like I do, we would call this telecollaboration or online intercultural exchange. But basically, all of these are different terminology to talk about the same thing, which is virtual exchange, okay? Bringing groups of learners online together to collaborate and to learn from each other. Okay, so what are the key components of these exchanges? Well, first of all, you have to consider, why am I bringing my students into contact with a group of learners in another country? What is the added benefit of this? Secondly, partnerships. Who will your students be worked with? How can I find partners? What type of class is appropriate for my project? Tasks. Once you bring your students together, what are they going to do together? What are they going to collaborate on? What are they going to talk about? Okay, all of this has to be prepared by the teachers beforehand. Technology, of course, what will they use? What tools are best suited for the project in hand? And then very importantly, monitoring and support. How can teachers help students to learn from these exchanges? There are so many critical incidents and intercultural learning moments that will emerge from these projects. But a teacher has to know how to integrate these projects into their classes so they can learn from them. Right? And then finally, academic recognition, because as we know, students who will stop participating in these projects if they are not given academic recognition of some side, a part of their final grade, or recognition in their European diploma supplement, something like that. And of course, teachers also deserve recognition for the work that they put into organizing these projects. Okay, so very quickly, just to, shall we say, force the point, and to go, to differentiate one more time between virtual exchange and what other people refer to as virtual mobility or MOOCs or online courses. Okay. First of all, virtual exchange is about people-to-people intercultural dialogue, getting people to interact together with people from other cultures. Whereas virtual mobility is often about students connecting to video lectures and online courses that are being offered by universities in other countries. Okay. In virtual exchange, intercultural learning and active global citizenship are key outcomes. Okay. Whereas in MOOCs and virtual mobility, the students are there to learn about the content of the courses that they are following. Okay. And finally, virtual exchange very often will use synchronous video interaction. So Zoom, for example, my students are using every semester Zoom to connect with their partners in America or their partners in Israel and these countries. Okay. Whereas very often in MOOCs and virtual mobility, this is based on asynchronous forums, with text-based forums. Okay, so there are just some more, basic differences. Okay, now I want to give you 3 different ways or examples of how virtual exchange is being integrated into university education. The first one, we're going to call it pre-mobility. Second one, blended mobility, which is going to be a term you're going to hear an awful lot more in the future because of the new Erasmus Plus program that is going to have a blended mobility section of funding. And finally, course integration, which is at the moment probably the most common way of introducing virtual exchange. So the first one, an example, e-mobility is all about getting students ready for going abroad, for their physical mobilities. Okay, for example, at the University of León, if students are planning to go on an Erasmus mobility, well, very often the places where they want to go to, there are a limited number of places, especially if they want to go to the United Kingdom, for example. So it is competitive, which means that students have to, get very high marks, or they have to do extra activities in order to gain points in order to get to that destination, be awarded that destination. So if students who want to go to certain destinations take part in a virtual international partner exchange, they are given extra marks for that. Students are put in contact with a student that is in the other university, and over a 2-month period, they take part in various tasks that we give them to do, okay, using email, Zoom, etc. And at the end of the exchange, students submit a portfolio with evidence of what they have learned and what they have done with their partner. And then successful participants are given an extra point in their Erasmus Plus application, okay, which helps them to get the destination they want to go to. Okay, that is just one example of e-mobility. Now, blended mobility. Blended mobility, the example I'm taking here comes from Würzburg in Germany. Okay, what happens with their students and their partners is the following. First of all, students from various universities follow online lectures on the subjects that are provided by the teachers in the different countries. Okay. Stage 2, students work online together with their international partners to carry out various collaborative projects. So they're doing, that's the virtual element, right? The virtual collaboration. But then the final stage where the students then travel to one of the universities where they finalize their projects and present them together. So that's the short-term physical mobility. That might take maybe a week or 2 weeks. And from what I understand, in the new Erasmus Plus program that is going to be launched next year, there are going to be special grants for this type of learning, where the University of Coimbra would link up with other universities. They would get their students collaborating online for a period of time about projects, and then there would be a small amount of funding available for your students and the teacher to travel to one of those universities and finalize their work, present their projects together and things like that. So instead of Erasmus being for maybe 6 months or for a full year, the grant would be for a 2-week period, for example. Okay. All right, so that's blended mobility. And then finally, the most common one, this is the one that I do in my courses every term, okay? This is basically a transnational virtual exchange, okay? This is an example between students in my class in León, with students in Sweden and Malmö in Sweden, and in Tel Aviv. And all of these students are studying the same thing. They are studying to be future foreign language teachers. So this is the faculties of education in the 3 different universities working together. What happens is that over an 8 to 10-week period, the 3 teachers, we give our students tasks that they have to do together. They have to collaborate together, making lesson plans, comparing their teaching situations, comparing the educational problems that exist in the different countries, etc., etc. Okay. As they are doing this, problems come up, misunderstandings happen. And in our classes, we refer to these projects, we refer to the interactions. We ask them what happened, what did you do this week? What problems are you having? What are you learning about the other countries? So you are integrating what is happening online into your classes on a daily basis. And then finally, students will submit maybe a portfolio about what they have learned, or they will make a class presentation, and 20% of their final grade in that subject will go to their virtual exchange. Okay, so this is the most basic level, right? The most simple way of doing a virtual exchange. And just to give you some example, and now we come back to what Marjo's, transversal competences, I would call them. I don't know if you'd call them transversal, Marjo, but anyway. What did you learn from these experiences? When you ask your students what you learned from these experiences, this is what they tell us. Look, collaboration skills and adaptability. Things that I've learned were how to be patient working in groups, how to adapt myself to tricky situations, and how to use innovative teaching strategies. Others mentioned intercultural skills. Most of all, adaptability and flexibility. Working with people from different countries and with different timetables teaches you how to be patient and forces you to find a common virtual place and time in order for your collaboration to succeed. This is very like the empathy, Marjo, that you were emphasizing, I think, at the beginning, right, of your talk, right? This idea of putting yourself into the shoes of another person, okay? And it is only by getting students to work together with people and to do kind of complicated tasks that require collaboration and agreeing on different things that this is what pushes them to develop these skills. Simply by presenting, allowing them to say, well, in Sweden we do this, in Ireland we do this, in Spain we do this, that isn't very challenging. What is challenging is forcing students to produce things together, and that's when the real intercultural learning emerges. Okay, time management and empathy. Look at this final comment. The fact of working with people from other countries prepares us for the future problems that we may have. That is to say, we have learned how to face problems of timing or agreement. I've also learned we have to understand and respect other people's thoughts. Okay, so you know this is why I was so happy. So when I was listening to Marjo's talk, I was going, you know, these are signs that these are relevant skills. What we are developing in these virtual exchanges are relevant for the students' future jobs and their future role as active citizens, okay, global citizens. Okay, so key advice. Okay, and then I'll finish. I don't know if I've gone over time or not. First of all, virtual exchange should not be seen as being in competition with physical mobility. Nobody is suggesting that a virtual exchange project over 8 to 10 weeks as part of a study of your course is as good as living for 8 months in Coimbra integrated into Portuguese society. It is not the same. Nobody is suggesting that. However, because we know that 80 to 90% of our students will not go abroad to Coimbra for their studies, you know, let's start thinking about how we can, you know, give them international experiences. Number 2, virtual exchange is not a question of simply matching and learning. It's not a question of teachers putting their students together and going, off you go, enjoy yourselves, learn from each other. Teachers have to know how to develop good tasks, and they have to know how to facilitate learning, okay, to mentor their students as they engage in these projects. And all that requires training for teachers, okay? And number 3, virtual exchange requires integration into the curriculum and explicit recognition of students' learning outcomes. So it has to be in what we call in Spain, our guías docentes, our curriculum, right, that we have to publish. The virtual exchange should be mentioned there, that it's 20% of your final grade, etc., etc. And finally, the teachers that will go to so much trouble learning how to do this, planning the exchanges with international partners, maybe even traveling to the other country to work with their partner on preparation for these exchanges, deserve recognition. Okay, at the University of León, we've achieved that teachers that engage in virtual exchange have a discount in the amount of teaching time that they have to do. Okay, so they have to teach a little bit less if they do prove that they're running virtual exchanges in their classes. Maybe the national ministries could also consider, for example, providing short funding for short mobility for teachers, so they could go to the other country and plan these exchanges with their partner teachers. Okay, that's basically it. There are many, many resources and online training that is available for teachers at university or even mobility officers that are interested in doing this. I have a document that I will share with Annabella. Maybe you could share with everybody, that I'll pass on to everybody. Okay, a PDF with lots and lots of links to, more information and to more platforms about this. Okay, all right, and even a virtual exchange partner tool, where if you want to find a partner class for your students, you can go there, create in Uni Collaboration. You can create a free account and announce your class there. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. I hope it wasn't too quick.
Well, thank you very much for this very, very interesting presentation. And we have already some questions. So I'll give the word first to Manuel Portela.
Thank you, Alexandre. Are you listening to me? Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
My question is for Dr. Kyllönen. I was really interested in your approach to the idea of holistic skills and competences. We've always learned a lot about the Finnish system as a forward-looking education system, so it was really interesting to learn about some of your ideas. But I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, and ask you about the other dimension of education, which is the disciplinary dimension, and how is that compatible to this kind of holistic approach? Because when you think of our society, it's also a very technical society, very skills-oriented society. And so if you have to teach students, even young students, advanced skills in mathematics or biology or chemistry, there has to be a certain amount of disciplinary training. And so my question is, how do you make this holistic approach compatible to teaching also the kind of technical skills that we also require?
Thank you very much. That's a very, very crucial question, and actually important question. And quite often this has happened also here in Finland, that when we are talking about phenomenon-based learning, a holistic approach to learning, so it's misunderstood that there is no kind of value of disciplinary understanding and knowledge. And that's not the thing. Actually, we can't read without letters and understanding of the word. So what is very crucial is to build the solid knowledge construction of each and every sciences, and that is we like to call it scaffolding the learner. So there is the place and space for this kind of, and the knowledge, so disciplinary knowledge is needed, as well the cross-disciplinary knowledge. And the approach, well, how we have arranged that is that when we are having this phenomenon-based learning processes, that happens at least twice a year in every year group or class or grade. So even then, when you are having this very holistic approach, so they are tightly connected to the curriculum and the objectives of different subjects. We don't, in our curriculum, there are objectives for each and every subject, but then how you learn them, it's an immersed way, and the task of the teacher, and that is sometimes very demanding, is to see the link that, okay, what are the objectives, competencies, for example, in terms of mathematics or literature or science, that these pupils are supposed to learn, and then also to make them visible for the learner. So we have made quite many aids for the teachers. So for example, we have a very concrete tool called phenomenon-based learning cards that are, by the way, available also in English if you're interested in. And there we are not giving an instruction that do A, B, C, D, but we have prepared some pedagogical questions for the teacher and for the pupils, that what they want to learn, and kind of guiding the learning path, so that in the end, it's really not something on top of the curriculum, but it's deeply inside or implement, and they are learning the curriculum objectives from the curriculum. Where we are very kind of lucky in terms of our national curriculum is that it's process-based curriculum. Even the contents are written in the process way, so that the learner learns or knows or understands. And of course, there are a lot, if I'm thinking the kind of traditional way of teaching, of this kind of fragmented pieces of knowledge from each part of a subject. So that's not what we are doing, but still we are not skipping the the very important constructions of knowledge and understanding of it, and every knowledge. And you mentioned mathematics, that's very important that they have the basic concept, but then there are also a lot to do, even if they are studying the mathematics. So this kind of holistic contextual approach where they understand, they don't only thrill the mathematical kind of formulas, but they understand, they learn to think in the mathematical way, and that's the difference, and also how it's related to their real life experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another question by Joana Cortes.
Hi, I would like to ask another question to Marjo. First, thank you very much for your super inspiring ideas and everything you were so nice enough to share with us. But I have a question, being a teacher and being a mother, of how I absolutely loved your idea of the transformative competences and the three strings that came from it: the creating the new value, the reconcile tensions and dilemmas, and the take responsibility. I think for me, being a teacher and also taking care of children who have teachers, see it as a very difficult task to put in practice by the teachers themselves. And my question, to try to be more focused, was to ask you, was it difficult, the process of training? How did you implement that with the teachers? How did you change the paradigm of teaching and approaching teaching in a more holistic way? Because the mindset is something very difficult to change, and it can take years. So my question was, did it take a long time? Is it still an ongoing process? Did you have kind of reactions of, no, we're not going to do this? How was your experience in Finland? Thank you.
You are very correct. It's a long journey, and we have to be patient enough that when we need forerunners, and we need people who have vision, and then also who are ready to try something that they are not that sure whether it will succeed or not. We need this type of teachers. And I'm lucky enough that for example, in our division in Helsinki, we have a big number of those teachers that there was kind of the readiness of with a quite big group of our teachers, that not only in Helsinki but national-wide in Finland. So we started to have a discussion in the 2010 or something, that what our children are facing in their everyday life, and not to think of their future, and the practices that we are kind of executing in our classroom. There's a mismatch. It's not what they need, and in the worst cases, so our children were quite frustrated, and they didn't see any sense of coming to school, because they couldn't see this is school and this is something else. So there was a big debate that helped us to make a kind of quicker or bigger or a leap to this kind of new thinking. So that was a national-wide discussion. So what happened in Helsinki? We started with the very small experiments, and actually we started from the most difficult part of our education system, and that is how high school, upper secondary, that is very subject orientated, and we started to implement these ideas there, and then it came kind of to the lower states for the first and second years of learners. This has been the approach for decades, so it was nothing very new. For the first and second graders, we usually don't even have a timetable, because it's a very immersed or integrated learning. But of course, there were some aspects that were not implemented there in that kind of precise way or conscious way. So, but it was easy for the first and second graders. The older you get, the more difficult it was. So we worked on the very many level, and it's still an ongoing process. And when it comes to this transformative competence and this kind of ability to create something new. So that's something that we are just starting to, it's kind of the next level for the phenomenon-based learning. We want to go deeper. And just a few hours before before this seminar, so I had an incredible, inspiring meeting with 2 of our teachers that wanted to contact me, and they said that they have been listening what I'm telling about this OECD concept, and they had practical ideas what to do. And we decided that we will meet in some weeks' time. We will sit and see what are the practical tools and models that we can offer to the teachers. And I rely a lot on that there are these super experts that when they get this idea, they kind of start to think how to implement it. And that happened with the phenomenon-based learning. So we have created tools for the teachers, material for the teachers. We have expert teachers we picked that we released part of their time from their teaching, and they were able to arrange workshops to our experience. The most effective way is if the teacher in action that is still teaching is kind of keeping workshops and telling them colleagues that how does this work or how does it not, and what went wrong. And then of course the crucial thing was that our leaders, the principals, were committed. They were behind this idea of transforming our education. So this, I could talk an hour, so let's stop here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have a third question by Henrique Madeira. So
thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thanks to both speakers. I really enjoyed the very positive and pragmatic presentations. And I'm as an engineer, I always like this kind of things. We know we have a lot of dilemmas. We know we have a lot of difficult questions, but in spite that we can really improve things and solve problems. And in that sense, I really enjoyed the presentations. My question is actually open to both speakers, but what sparks my question was slide number 8 from Marjo's presentation. I'm not sure if it is slide number 8, but it was a slide with a kind of a mosaic with some keywords: resilience, creativity, critical thinking. And what came immediately to my mind is we had a kind of a schizophrenic world. On one hand, students, children, all of us, we are more or less immersed in a digital world that is not asking us to memorize stuff. Is asking us to well, we are demanding a kind of almost immediate rewarding. And so, and this looks a little bit contradictory with patience, being patient, resilience. And I'm surprised with the data that Robert presented with the statements of the students. But for example, being creative, we need a lot of things in our memories. We cannot create from an empty screen or paper. And if today, children and all of us, we are not memorizing stuff anymore because we think it's useless. It is out there, everything at Google. The issue of creativity is an issue. Resilience is the same. And in that sense, I was very surprised with Robert's results. So students apparently in some circumstances are very patient. And in some others, they just, they don't have time to read a document, for example. They ask a video. More than that, they ask a 3-minute video because they are really, they don't have the patience to see long explanations. And critical thinking is even worse than that, because in order to expect critical thinking from someone, the person should evaluate whatever he's reading, watching. And evaluation means critical thinking sometimes is regarding us. I'm against, I don't agree But obviously critical thinking is saying, well, I really agree with this and I know why. And this means some sort of evaluation. So requires a lot of competencies. And this looks to me pretty much contradictory with what we have and what we see and what every day in the digital world. So why, on one hand, we have this, and on the other hand, in the context of, for example, the experiences and the tools you presented, it seems that the students behave in a different way. They are patient, they have critical thinking. So can you, maybe both, explain a little bit of your experience on this, or please tell me that maybe I'm overstating the, let's say, the bad side of all this digital world.
Enrique, I couldn't agree with you more. I think what you are saying makes perfect sense. A couple of things. I mean, I totally agree that, first of all, that the frameworks that we are reading about nowadays and the skills that we are emphasizing would seem to push us away from, shall we say, the skill of learning, right? The skill in Spain, they always say, you know, sitting down with your two elbows like this and studying and learning something. Okay. What I would suggest is that these new frameworks and these new approaches to learning and to teaching are not shall we say, discarding this completely. Okay, they're not saying that this has no longer any value, that students no longer need to sit down and learn things. Okay, however, what they're trying to do, I think, is to balance things up a little bit better, to make things a little bit more realistic. That rote learning and actually, you know, learning information and having information is important, but it is not the only thing that education, university education, should be about, or any kind of education should be about. I'm not an expert on how things work in Portugal, but I know in Spain, you know, in university education, and from what I can see from my children in secondary school education, there's a huge emphasis still on traditional basic learning by heart and regurgitating what you have learned, despite of all of these frameworks that we then talk about when we come together in conferences. Okay, and we develop all these frameworks and we talk about these modern approaches to learning. But then when my kids go to school, they come home with big heavy textbooks that they have to learn and regurgitate come exam time. And I know that still happens in Ireland as well, and maybe it does happen in Portugal too. Okay, so I think that these frameworks that we are talking about and these approaches we are talking about are trying to shift the balance without totally saying what the idea of learning and learning information is no longer relevant. And I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, in order to have an opinion, you first have to know both sides of a story, but you have to know what the both sides are. Okay, my kids that are teenagers now, they are beginning to have arguments in school and debates in school with their friends about the politics of the extreme right in Spain that has become very popular in recent times. Vox, maybe some of you have heard of Vox and things like that. And you have in their classes, you know, students that would be supporting the ideas of Vox. And my children would come home saying they won the argument. And I said, of course they won the argument because you didn't have your facts in order to give them the facts back. Okay, so first of all, you need to be informed before you win arguments. And so debating skills are only good if you know what you're talking about. Okay, maybe that's a simplistic example, but anyway. Marjo, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much. That was a very crucial kind of hit the nail question, and we have been discussing and kind of searching the phenomena, and actually we are working very closely to the University of Helsinki, Turku, and Helsinki and Turku. Yes, and we had one research that was mind the gap, and it was about the digitalization and its effect to the young ones learning, and this kind of, is this multitasking really something to look for, or is it that they are not determined in they don't have this kind of pace and resilience of doing or concentrating on one thing, and I'm not going to the results, but it was really good information for us to think that how much do we, for example, use time with the devices, and then there were a group of pupils who really benefit from that they could use the device that they are familiar with their everyday life, and they were those that were in the biggest danger of dropout. So we need research-based knowledge, not only this kind of experienced based understanding of the learning, and this what we should, because of course we can't affect the leisure time what our young ones are doing and how the parents are kind of bringing them up, but teaching them, but what we can think and what we must think at school, that what are these skills like resiliency, what does it mean to be a critical thinker? You can't be you are not a critical thinker if you know how to press your thumb up in the Facebook for any information. So in this world where the flood of information is everywhere, so that critical thinking that also contains the idea of valuation of the information. It's not only that you are critical, but to evaluate what is good for the future and what is not. So that's very important, and we must teach this to our children. They don't know that naturally, and these two things that have a holistic approach, not to kind of have the ability of reading and reflecting and make your own kind of conclusion from the information that is available. It's a very crucial skill, and it's not contradictory to this kind of what I said, that it has to make sense to the learner. It really makes sense to the learner. It's the way we ask them, and it's the way we give them the task. But to be honest, I don't believe a lot in this kind of read the thick book by heart, and then we call it to spook it to the paper, and then we probably all have the very same experience, that after this kind of test, the next day you didn't remember a lot. I remember once when I was in chemistry test, and I did very well. I got the highest score, and then I looked at the paper. Was it me who wrote this? Because you just kind of nothing was sticked into my brains. But that does not mean that there is no place for kind of understanding and repeating to understand the information you get in a way that you can tell to the other. But the tools we use, for example, just I close then here. For example, in this phenomena-based learning, when they are doing the research and when they are working together, so they have to explain to their mates, for example, what they have found and what they have done in their project. And if you can tell to someone that what is the phenomena, what happens here, what is if it's a smartphone, so how does it function, and what are the kind of components, so you have learned it, and you don't need to read it from paper and try to remember it by heart.
So we have 2 questions left, and due to the limits of time, I suggest that we consider both questions together. So the first one comes from Claudia. She wrote in the YouTube the following. So education transcends school as we know. These skills are exclusive to teachers. Or are these skills exclusive to teachers? Do you work with other educational institutions of non-formal education? So it's a very practical question. The other question is from José Oliveira Martins, so I'll give you the word. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for both of the talks. My question is actually more for Marjo, and I'm thinking about the slide which said life is not divided into subjects. Why should learning? If you remember well that slide. But I'm thinking that the ways in which humans categorize the world, and thinking in terms of perception and cognition, is actually a natural process. So if you think about human activity as a long history of classifying the world around us, not only in terms of objects and actions, but also in concepts and abstractions. So if life is not divided into subjects, as you say, then our human history tells us that subjectifying life has been quite helpful and crucial. So I'm wondering whether your point is not so much against subjects per se, but rather about the ways in which these subjects are accepted and passed down from generation to generation as accurate representations of reality. So the emphasis should be on remixing and finding other ways of producing subjects and explanations of the world. So I'm just wondering if your point is about the ways in which we receive subjects and passed on from generation to generation without asking about them, or whether the subjects are actually in the way in which we can better understand the world.
Okay, shall I start? So for the first question, so yes, we do cooperate, not sufficiently, but when I said that in our strategy, actually it's a city strategy, we said that the whole city is the learning platform. That means that we also involved the other sectors and players, and also these kind of non-formal education institutions, as well the third sector, to work with us. And we have been really lucky, because people in this area, they have been quite thrilled about the idea that learning happens everywhere, in the museums, even in the shopping centers. And we have a lot of people that are eager to think with us, or organizations that are eager to think with us how to develop the whole city as a learning platform and space. And then to this other question, so I must admit that the impression that I wrote, and I have done that in my previous presentation as well, as we did it with our principles. So it's a bit provocative, because it does not mean that, of course, science, for example, we couldn't understand our world without the science and mathematics and every sciences. But the problem there, what we want to emphasize with this sentence and arouse people's thinking, that at least in our traditional way of thinking, so the subject has been very, very isolated from one to another, and just kind of quotating one of the students who said that it really took him a long time to understand that actually they kind of they were discussing the very same phenomena, but they, in the mathematics lesson, it was split in the mathematics thing. You were only thinking of mathematics, and then when it comes to the science lesson, so you had the very same phenomenon. You did it in that, and even in the home economics, you were tackling with the very same phenomena, but you did not combine them. And with this kind of thinking, that although the world is described with the help of different sciences, but our experience is holistic. And when thinking of young people's learning, we should give them this kind of experience, that you can look the very same phenomena using the different approaches of different sciences, and not learning them in the isolated silos. That's the kind of thing there. But I must admit that I used that sentence to provoke your thinking also.
This is all such a big challenge, you know, for so many institutions, the way we are going to be going about this. But I think the key thing, from what I can see, from what I can listen to, from what Marjo said, and trying to find maybe a connection to what I was trying to say, is, you know, the idea of networking is going to become more and more important, I think, here. Okay, that is the idea of that, building networks, and in the, you know, the Erasmus program, the whole idea of European university networks is going to be more and more important, as I think, as we move forward. Okay.
If I may add something from the university, I'm representing the local government and educators, but I also had a very, very interesting, when we started this kind of implementing this phenomenon-based learning. So I discussed with the very honorable and distinguished professor from the University of Jyväskylä, and he told me that in that university, if someone knows his name, Jouni Välijärvi. So in that university, but at least in that university, they had started, the professors, they have started to discuss about this kind of more holistic approach when they are doing some research. And he described it in this way, that in the past, when they have a joint research project with the different faculties, so it was like a pizza, and everyone took their slide, went to their chambers and did this research, and then they had the publication, and they were chapters from different faculties and researchers, and that was kind of the cooperation. And now they say that they have changed it in the way that when they have this research problem or question that they want to do together and resolve together and find answers to that, so they sit around the very same table and start a scientific discussions that, okay, if I'm looking this from the education perspective, this is the thoughts that I get from there, and if I look from the kind of medical perspective, so this is what comes to my mind. And he said that this type of process has kind of brought them to another level in their own scientific thinking as well. So he said that it's very crucial that we also do the very same thing. It's not kind of neglecting the science, but put people together to really find solutions. And that's what is needed also when we meet these wicked problems that can't be solved by using one approach, just to mention the climate change, for example.
The problem is that in universities, we tend to live in our silos, right? We you know, the humanities live in their silos, the scientists live in their silos. Okay, and I'm constantly trying to sell, so to speak, to my colleagues I have friends that are colleagues in the Faculty of Engineering, for example, and the Faculty of Economics, to do these type of virtual exchanges, and they always rush to tell me that this wouldn't suit their approach to learning. Okay, and you know, they all give me these reasons why this doesn't work for them, so to speak. This is more a humanities thing. They always dismiss it as, you know, they dismiss it as humanities thing. Which, you know, you're coming from an engineer, you know what they mean by that, right? No offense, Enrique, but you can imagine. Okay, so this is a challenge. I mean, but Marjo, what you're saying is right, and what your colleague in Jyväskylä is saying is right. But it's a challenge that we have to overcome. Okay, you know, this silos that we all, you know, the humanities stick together, the engineers work together, etc., etc. Maybe that doesn't happen in Coimbra, does it?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I figured. Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you, for this wonderful discussion, presentations and discussion.
Okay, thank you.
It was really interesting one.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you all.